whenever I was going through some very dark days, I leaned in on purpose and mission. And thank God I had my business, because I took all the pain that I was going through and put it into my business. That was fuel, and that allowed me to, number one, escape those dark days, but it allowed me to really build something that I'm proud of. So I use pain for purpose. My name is Mike Fallat. I own the #1 book creation service for entrepreneurs known as Dream Starters Publishing, and I want to help you bring your story to life in a book so you can use that book to generate leads and attention for your business. Contact me today. Welcome to another episode of $1 Million Stories, where we get to interview authors from all over the world. You know, I love talking to authors because they have the courage to take their thoughts and their stories and their lessons and put it down into a book and share it with the many, ultimately changing their legacy and destiny in the process. And if you want to write a book out there, check out Dream Starters Publishing. We can help you out with wherever you're at in the process. And if you have a book that's already done, you want to generate leads with it, check out bookmarketingcrm.com. Now, if you're listening to this podcast, most likely you're an entrepreneur looking to start or grow a business. In order to do that, you got to get your mind right. And many people face these mental health challenges. And some people have different solutions, and some people struggle with it for their whole lives. And once I was able to have a ground zero moment in my life, I realized I needed to become the hero of my own story and face those demons head on. And that's why I think that this book is going to be extremely relevant for anybody who might share that background of myself. And so the book that we're talking about is called You Are Not Alone: Mental Health Mentors Take the Journey with You. And the author, who is very well known in this space, Doug Lawrence, is with us. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Well, let's start off with the genesis of this book. What made you want to write it? And if you could maybe give a quick little snapshot of where you come from and how you got to where you're at now.
So we'll kind of start maybe in the middle, somewhere
All
there.
right.
Um, the book primarily got started. So this will be book, this is number 2 and number 3 I'm working on, but number 1 was kickstarted by a colleague of mine who I went through the RCMP training program with, who had actually said, you know, you should write a book. You got all these blog articles. Why don't you take and pull them all together and put them all into a book? And, you know, however you want to go about doing that, do that. So that's what I did. And so fast forward to You Are Not Alone. It was somewhat of a similar storyline in that it was, people came to me and said, you know, we're going through all kinds of different things. We're dealing with, you know, post-traumatic stress. We're dealing with grief, and we're just not sure. Is there some tips, tricks, things that you can share with us to help us on our healing journey? And so as a result, hence, You Are Not Alone, I sat down and started to write, and kind of surprised myself how 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 much or how badly I actually needed help myself in order to be able to move forward. And you had, you know, one of the things I guess that I should also mention is I'm a retired Royal Canadian Mounted Police officer. So I served in the police force for 25 years, bounced all over, had all kinds of traumatic situations, events, and that I had to deal with at the time, and then also I had to deal with afterward. And, you know, right from the point of, well, just all kinds. I the one that I typically would share with some people is that I was in a small rural community and was part of the community as well. And we had put together this men's hockey team that was going to go down the highway and going to take on the neighboring community. And we had a young 16-year-old lad that actually came out, tried out, and made the team. And we were all just absolutely ecstatic over the fact that he, you know, made the team, and he was going to go home and tell his parents right away. And so he goes home and he walks through the door, and they're absolutely inebriated beyond any recognition. And as a result of that, he death by suicide.
Oh,
So he went into the bedroom and found the rifle, and it was death by suicide. And ended up, so I had a close personal relationship with him, being involved in the community, and that I ended up having to investigate his death. Then I had to end up on top of it all. If you think that that's traumatic, I ended up having to transport his body to the nearest morgue so we could get an autopsy done. It was policy that anytime there was a death like that, that you had to have an autopsy done. And so there it was, the middle of winter, 40 degrees below zero, and I had to drive 8 hours one way to the nearest. And anyhow, the story goes on from there, but that's an example of some of the trauma that I've went through, and as a result, that I ended up with post-traumatic stress myself, and I'm I'm coming out of that cave, and I lost my wife to cancer in 2021. So then I've been plummeted back into another cave, but now this is one that deals more specifically with the trauma that you go through when you're grieving the loss of a loved one.
yeah. We had a client that was a firefighter, and whenever I thought of firefighters beforehand, I had no idea that they were pretty much involved with many first responding activities that were extremely scary. And just by him telling me what he went through, I started to have like sort of these scary thoughts, right? Like, how desensitized would I be if that happened to, certain things around me? And it never leaves you. I realized that first responders, police officers, when it comes to ambulance people, individuals who are firefighters, all these individuals, they face so much. And so it lingers, right? Even if you don't realize that it's impacting you, it compounds and it makes it really scary once you do turn around, like you said, and try to escape that cave or face that dragon. So before we get into that aspect, I believe, and maybe I'm looking at certain data that points to the fact that mental health challenges are either being exposed more than ever or growing faster than ever. I think suicides in the past couple of years are at an all-time high. What do you believe is happening? Why are kids or young men killing themselves at a higher rate than ever before? And why are we noticing this mental health battle as clear as day, as maybe this wasn't even thought about 60, 70 years ago?
It it was kind of thought about, but it was not spoken about very much. And the example that I typically would use is my grandfather, God bless his soul, um, had some mental health issues and ended up, he too had death by suicide. And while I was still a very, very young person, back then they didn't talk about it, and back then he could not be buried in the local cemetery because he had mental health issues, so it was frowned upon. So every year I make the trip back up to the old homestead, and I try to clean things up around there and stuff like that, but the I didn't know that that was how they looked at things until my parents had actually one day over, we were having lunch together, and they said, your grandfather, death by suicide. And I went, not grandpa, that would certainly not be, he had served in the military, and, he raised his two boys, and um, so I had a very difficult time dealing with that, and there are times where I kind of wonder whether or not the sort of the grief and stuff that we're going through today, if it wasn't started back then because of the loss of grandpa. You kind of wonder.
Yeah. Yeah, you start to see how dots connect potentially. And then also you might see it in certain people that never really diagnosed it, right? They just said, "Oh, well, you know, he was depressed," right? But now you're starting to see maybe there is a lot of writing on the wall prior to the really dark days. And maybe I don't know if this is happening where you're at, but I see kids being prescribed antidepressants at 5, 6, 7 years old. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't know if that's the answer because you're playing with kids' minds at a very young age. In my opinion, it isn't the answer. And then the aspect of religion, like you said, they weren't even buried in the same cemetery. I think because spiritually, they say you will never see the hand of God if you killed yourself. And you're playing God by, removing yourself from earth. And so I believe you're talking about a moral decline, spirituality decline. Not many people are believing in God like they once did, but also you have a total increase in pharmaceuticals. You add those two together, I think it's bound to happen. So, do you believe in what I'm seeing too? That's a bad combination.
Well, I'm not a huge fan of medication, especially when it comes to dealing with the mental health space, because if you talk to anybody who is experiencing or going through a healing journey mental health wise, all they want is somebody to listen and hear. They don't want somebody that's going to, well, here, let me write you a prescription and everything will be better tomorrow. No, it won't. The issues are still going to be there. But if we have that conversation where, I'm listening and hearing and you're telling me, this is how I feel and all that sort of stuff, we can probably work our way through some of those issues and without the use of medication. Now, there is places where, yes, but I'm kind of startled by the fact that, you've seen incidents where 5 and 6 and 7-year-olds are being prescribed medication. I think there's maybe different ways that we could actually deal with that rather than having it, that's the answer to everything, and it's not.
Hmm. Now, in your book, I'm assuming you have some strategies and ways of helping people get through this. And whenever I was going through some very dark days, I leaned in on purpose and mission. And thank God I had my business because I took all the pain that I was going through and put it into my business that was fuel, and that allowed me to, number one, escape those dark days, but it allowed me to really build something that I'm proud of. So I use pain for purpose. And I think an individual named Jordan Peterson really helped me understand myself at a higher level. So understanding why I had those thoughts, and maybe it was me kind of dissecting some of the weak parts of my life, and it was burning all of that away, and I was becoming stronger. Because I was starting to ask very, very deep and scary questions, getting very scary answers. Oh, I was the fault. I was the cause of all this. Oh, I'm drinking because I need a distraction in my life to take me away from maybe something that I need to be focusing on. So I started to take more accountability. And I always say maybe a man is built for struggle, but understanding that if you tie a very strong purpose to your life, you can run through fire and you can slay dragons. But is that a part of your remedy? I mean, I'm assuming it fits many people, but maybe not everyone. So what do you say?
Well, I've been through the alcohol trip. I would come when especially when I was stationed in the northern part of the province that I was working in, and I would go out on a call, and it would be something like, even if using the example that I gave of the young lad, I'd come back to my trailer that I lived in and go to my cabinet that I had. It was basically a liquor cabinet, and I'd haul out a bottle of Scotch whiskey, twist the top off, throw the top away, and I'd drink it until it was gone. And then I would try to convince myself that I had just solved all my problems, when only all I had done is compounded them and made them worse.
Oh, yeah, it was a mask, but it was even making it worse. That's a good point.
So the big thing is that you don't need alcohol. You don't need prescription drugs. There are, like I said, there are places for them, but to get yourself hooked on those, there are better paths for you to follow. And, you know, the that's why you are not alone, is that's the whole story behind it, is that You don't have to, if you are experiencing problems today with your mental health and the journey you're on is a struggle, you don't need to turn or resort to any of those things. All you need to do is reach out and say, I need help.
That probably lends to chapter 3 and chapter 4 of your book. What is a mentor? And then finding a journey mentor. Tell us
Yeah.
about that.
So, well, that's been sort of my quest, for lack of a better choice of words, is to be able to get people to accept and, well, understand and then accept the fact that if you can tap into mentoring someone who is a good mentor, that they're going to be able to help you on your journey and stuff like that. And as an example, when it comes to entrepreneurs, one of the things that I do that a lot of other mentors may not is I do what I call is a scan of the individual's, kind of a scan of the body, to sort of be able to say, okay, are there any telltale signs here that I need to be concerned about? And I've actually worked with an individual where the first time we met together, and it was virtual, but the first time we met together, I told my story about how I ended up getting post-traumatic stress and had to deal with that, and now I was dealing with grief, and that in itself is a mental health challenge, no matter how you look at it. And soon as I had told my story, it created that safe place for this individual to have a conversation. And they opened up and said, I feel better, because you've shared something very personal. I want you to know that I too have been diagnosed with 4 different mental health issues. And I struggle some days with having my business, and I'm not sure which direction I should go and all that sort of stuff. So they were experiencing, as an entrepreneur, they were experiencing their own kind of mental health challenges that needed to be addressed in order for them to be successful.
Hmm. And I'm assuming after, yeah, like you talk about the workplace in this book quite a bit. The turnover. Is it because people lose that drive or sense of identity, or they feel like they don't belong anymore? They feel like the outsider, and if they don't know themselves, they don't know how they can help others, I think. So there's a huge amount of turnover based off of mental health. So can you explain that?
Well, it's the big thing is that, and I take a look back at us males where, there's the stigmatism that to identify yourself as someone with mental health issues is a sign of weakness. And I would suggest that that can spread into at an organizational level as well. And the sad part is that a lot, if not most organizations, do not have a support structure in place to help people that are on a healing journey, that are trying to deal with, post-traumatic stress. They're trying to deal with the grieving the loss of a loved one, or any kind of a loss for that matter. They're going through and they're struggling with that. So, the big thing that organizations need to be able to do is, you need to be accountable for setting up that support structure that's going to help your employee or employees to be able to deal with stuff. And you need to do that sooner rather than later.
You have a lot of stats in this book, and I'd love to hear if you have anything at the top of your mind without, I mean, doing too much research. But what's it say here? Close to 800,000 people die due to suicide every year, which is one person every 40 seconds.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. What is going on? I mean, and so we have more than ever, right? It's crazy how we have all the social media, the AI, the tools, the bells and whistles, the cars, and it seems like the more we grow as a society with all the hoopla, people are becoming less and less happy, less and less satisfied, losing control of themselves. And maybe it's all connected, right? Social media, how the culture is treating this whenever it comes to, giving individuals pharmaceuticals at a very young age, not taking responsibility to some degree, the identity crisis that you're seeing at a mass scale. Are you a man? Are you a woman? Are you both? What are you? There's so much unclarity and it's just leading to confusion. So, in my opinion, maybe this is being done on purpose to keep people lost. And then there's another aspect of it is that what if it's just a lot of different forces coming together that create this, and the kids are being hurt more than ever. And then obviously individuals who've been burying it deep inside their soul are not willing to share it out with the world because they don't want to be put in that box of, oh, you're just a complainer. Who are you? Or you don't have it as bad as other people. So, I mean, there's a lot going on here. Do you see any optimism, any light at the end of the tunnel?
I not a lot, to be truthfully honest. I think we've still got some darkness that we have to overcome. Uh, and the thing, you take a look at all the things we've been talking about, we haven't factored in the impact that COVID had on,
Oh yeah.
so people that are like myself, very much relationship driven. I need that time to go and grab a coffee in a coffee shop with somebody and just have a nice conversation and stuff like that. And COVID took that away. And so now I'm grieving the loss of all of those relationships and dealing with that. And then you have, you know, COVID was identified as a pandemic. How come mental health isn't a pandemic? How come we're not dealing with that? Cancer is either the leading or second most leading disease that is resulting in a loss of life. How come that's not identified as a pandemic? So there's all these other factors, like you've mentioned, that are starting now to get a bit of recognition, but not in the manner that I think they need to be. I think they need to be elevated to a pandemic level where we start to spend more and more time trying to, I would like it where people don't feel threatened to come out of the closet, as I call it, come out of the closet and ask for help.
I like how you put this phrase journey mentor. I think mentorship is crucial. We talk about the hero's journey quite a bit on this podcast. And, in order to win the battles, slay the dragons, you need a mentor. And so it doesn't matter if it's going to be making $1 million or just to feel better about yourself and where you're going and maybe having more clarity. That probably can help you escape that cave. And I love how you put that. It's very much like Plato's allegory of the cave. Once you escape it, it's almost like your moral obligation to go back down and try to get other people out too. So, um, yeah, I think that's huge. Now, when it comes to some tips or strategies, in my opinion, maybe you have the mentorship, but there's some things about taking inventory of your habits. Like you said, you were drinking. Taking that away might give you some type of look in the mirror moment that helps you start to fix yourself or start to take inventory and give you more self-awareness. So whether it's creating good habits, I mean, I've heard that, 35 minutes of exercise per day produces enough dopamine in your brain that you're going to automatically feel better no matter what depression state you're in. And then I've also heard, and this is pretty wild, but reading and writing on a consistent basis gives you more clarity, which also fires more dopamine in your brain. And then that helps you fight depression. So, any other tips and strategies outside of being getting a mentor and taking inventory of your life and maybe some habits slash bad habits that you're applying? What would you recommend?
Well, and that you've raised a good point with the habit sort of storyline in that the fact that if you have habits that are not conducive to let's call them positive habits, that I read a book and it just has resurfaced again here not too horribly long ago. But if you have habits that you want to change, you have to replace them with something else,
Hmm.
right? So um, I was drinking, and I had to replace that with something else. And as it turned out, it ended up being the relationship that I developed, resulting in getting married to my wife, Deborah. Um, that helped me deal with the drinking, and because now I had somebody that I could have that conversation with to be able to say, you know, without kind of getting into the details down in the muck and that of what had taken place and all that sort of stuff. It was just having somebody to be able to say, this is what happened and this is how I feel. Is that, am I normal? Am I okay? Or is there something really truly wrong with me that I need to fix or get fixed? So, there were those pieces, but the most important thing that I have seen and that I practice with my mentoring is the listening and hearing. So the effective communication part, the listening and hearing, uh, of, sitting down with somebody that's going through and experiencing, mental health issues and challenges like that. If as a takeaway from our show today, if you do nothing else but number one, when someone extends their hand and says, I need help, that you reach out and you say, I am here to help you. And you do so. Number two, you do not tell them or you try to fix. What you need to be able to do is listen and hear from a place of being non-judgmental. You want to be able to, just listen and hear. And I know I have found that I've had immense success working with individuals if I stick to that roadmap, and that I not judge them, and I encourage them to come out of the closet, and I encourage them to try and help others as well. So you can help yourself, but you can also help others as well.
Hmm. Now there's an individual who works on our team, and she was my first hire, and she's still with us. 2017, she joined our company, and I remember her saying that she was going through some really difficult things at home. And once she was with us a couple years, she was really comfortable with opening up to me. And she said she was going through many mental health challenges, specifically because of her environment. And once she was able to escape that environment and move into her own place, she was able to really gain control of her life, and you could just see her start to flourish in business. And then we had a really tough conversation one day, and she said, "You have no idea how much this job gives me meaning and purpose to my life." So being able to escape my environment and finding something that I can latch onto, that I could pour my energy into, really did set me free. So environment and career, I think, very crucial to mental health. So anything you could say about that?
Well, and the other part that's important is that you provided her that safe place for her to have a conversation. That wasn't there before, where, she was living obviously in a not so desirable relationship, and now, and where she wouldn't feel safe to be able to have those conversations, and this is what I'm going through. And so what you've done is you've created that safe place for her to have those conversations. And the other part that's really important is the aspect of trust. So you've, on top of everything else, you've created a safe place, but one that's filled with trust. So that's also another important factor as well.
Wow, yeah, never really thought about how important it is to. I mean, it was, and by the way, in the early days as a leader of the company, I was not a great leader. So I don't know if I really instilled that trust. Like, you could tell me anything. I was more of like, are you getting the work done? That's all that matters. But as time goes on, the relationship was built up. There was such a mutual respect at a certain point. Then the trust was there. So I don't know if I did it because I was like focusing on it, or I was able to just develop as a leader, and because I realized self-development, my own self-development was so crucial. So the more I grew as a person, the more I was able to understand how important it was. So it doesn't happen overnight, But self-development is really where it all starts, because I would never have been able to really give her that assurance that, hey, no matter what you say, you're okay here, right? So it doesn't happen overnight, but it is something that's part of the evolution, I think, of the entrepreneur.
Well, it is. And, the other aspect of that is that who wins in all of this? If you had to take a look and sort of talk about, winners and losers and stuff like that, the organization, your company benefits from the
Bingo.
efforts, right?
Yeah.
From the benefits that of you spending time and helping, the employee feel safe in the workplace and stuff like that. It's your culture is one that's going to attract people to come to your organization to work. And for those that are there, it's going to give them a reason to stay rather than jump ship and go someplace else.
Damn good point. You're right, because it's like, who really wins? Obviously, yeah, the company, the person, and the clients. Which, if you have all three winning, it's going to be like a fun atmosphere to be a part of. So yes, the company does win. And I've heard this great quote, and you've probably heard it before. But if you want better workers, help them become better people. That's it. And
That's it.
so it starts with the self development rather than the career development, and it all connects it eventually.
Well, and that's a really good point because the definition that I live and die by as far as mentoring is concerned is a two-way trusted relationship where both the mentor and the mentee learn and grow together on a personal and professional level.
Hmm. Case in point, this individual and myself, we're going to see Jordan Peterson in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So I got a ticket, and she's going to go with me because I want her to. She's like, "Oh, I love Jordan Peterson." So a team member and myself going to see Jordan. Are you a fan of Jordan Peterson and what he says? He's a clinical psychologist, very well known. And he's from Cali. Yeah, he's from Canada. So you probably know him really well.
I know of him,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, he's from Canada, so yeah, I figured there's
Yeah.
some type of crossover. But do you like his work? Are you familiar with it to a high
Yes.
degree?
Yeah, I am definitely. And you're going to have it's going to be a time well spent for the two of you to go and hear him. So
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, I can't wait. He doesn't travel too often to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. That's where I'm located. So we're really looking forward to it. But you talked about culture, and I really want to touch on this. I think that you just saw what happened with the FTC. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but the FTC just banned non-compete clauses. And there's all kinds of blogs and articles and news reports being created about how now culture is even more important because companies can't lock people down with non-compete clauses. And I've always hated non-compete clauses, but I'm totally against them. It just shines on, hey, when somebody has free will, you really got to create a great culture for them to want to be there. Not that they have to be there, they want to be there, they want to work. And so, if somebody's out there building a business, how would somebody create a great culture, in your opinion, and to make it a very safe zone slash very trustworthy experience for individuals to come and work at? What would you recommend?
well, what you've touched on is actually something that's actually quite interesting because when I was back working in government in this one particular area of government, always used to get very upset when an employee would give notice and say we're moving on to another opportunity. And I used to say, that's great. That's fabulous news because now somebody says, well, where did you work before? Oh, I worked at company A. Oh, oh, and you're leaving? Well, yeah, I found an opportunity. It wasn't that they couldn't provide it, but they didn't have that opportunity available at the time. And the other aspect of that was to talk, to the leaders in the organization who saw this as a detriment. And I tried to convince them that they needed to look, if you're going to market your organization, here's the best way to do it is you have employees that you spend time, you get them up to snuff, and now they're marketable and other organizations come and steal them away. That's a positive thing.
Mm.
That's not something you need to look at from the other aspect.
Yeah, so look at it as a positive, right? I think that if you can make it as easy as possible for people to say, yes, I want to work there, or no, I want out, you are having them deselect you from their life, right? If you put your personality on display, very much like Dr. Joe Dispenza says, your personality creates your personal reality. You want to make it as easy as possible for people to say yes or no to you. And if they don't belong in your life and and you don't belong in theirs, make it easy for a clean break. And so if an opportunity comes up for these people, you don't want them to say, I have to go to work. All right, I'm just going to do it for the pay. You want people who are raving fans, a part of the organization. That's how you create a culture, right? Therefore, it's like a cancer. And individuals who have low energy, low interest, low excitement usually beget or create more of the same. And so energy affects each other, and you want to make it as easy as possible. So trustworthy, experiences, or maybe making it as comfortable as possible for people to say yes or no, my God, it's a win for everybody, in my opinion. So I'm glad you touched on that.
So I've done a bit of culture work and I do it based on the premise of two questions. The first question I get employees to answer is, can you describe the culture that your organization has in 3 words? And
Hmm.
the second piece is if you could change any 5 things in the company today, one of which cannot be firing somebody, what would they be?
3 words to describe the culture, and what are 5 things you would change about the company without firing somebody?
Yeah.
What do you usually see in those? What have you heard? What's the common theme?
A lot of it is leadership driven. It's a lot of it is the aspect that people say, well, if we had decent leadership, um, we'd be a lot further ahead. And my response back to that is, so then what are you going to do to change that to make it better?
Got it. So individuals, I mean, what you're saying is that no matter where you're at in a company, what people seek is strong leadership, clear leadership. And so, as an entrepreneur who listens to this podcast, it's your moral obligation to become the best version of yourself so you have the strong leadership skills that other people admire and value, period.
And that includes not only your employees, but your clients as well. They will be attracted to an organization where there are strong pockets of leadership.
Very good. Yes. Yeah. So I've always heard that too, where it comes down to sales individuals, sales reps, the great ones are really leaders, right? They're leading them to the solution, or they're leading them to decision making, right? So you're not selling anything. Nobody wants to be sold. But individuals admire leadership qualities in general, clear communication,
Mhm.
strong backbone, right? Moral code, moral compass. And maybe everybody's judging you based off of your leadership skills nonstop throughout your life. It's great. Nice. Outside of your own book, is there one that you recommend to our audience? Many people, listen to this podcast because they want insight on some books that maybe they've never heard of. So, is there any book that stands out in your life that maybe got you to fall in love with personal development or battling mental health head on?
You touched on it just a few minutes ago where you talked about raving fans. Ken Blanchard actually writes a book called Raving Fans, and I he's got a couple of other ones that are just as good. The titles escape me, but if you did a search on Amazon with Ken Blanchard's name, I'm sure the books will all come up, and they're short stories, and that's the part that I like is that they tell a story.
Mm. Ken Blanchard. I can't believe I've heard of that name. I just don't know any of his books. But Raving Fan, I picked that up from another book. I got to check this out. I don't know that book at all. Raving Fans. Ken Blanchard. All right, good deal. I went to your website. Very well done website, by the way. talentc.ca. If people went to it, what would they find, and what do you offer on there?
There's a landing page that you can go to that you can actually get an excerpt of You Are Not Alone. So, and it's doesn't cost you anything to sort of kick the tires as I describe it. And, you can take away the smaller version of the book to be able to, it gives you a chance to sort of say, okay, do I want to buy the whole book, or just, can I find what I need to find in that small section? You're also gonna there's what's in on the website is basically an overview of what it is that I'm doing. Like I have some different service offerings and stuff that I use with organizations. Like I have one that is it's called termination versus mentoring. So if you're going to terminate an employee, give them to me for 5 hours, and we'll see what we can do to change their behavior and get them back on track to becoming that productive employee that you know all too well. So we do that, and then there should be a linkage to my business partner who actually provides certification for mentors, so you can actually go through a process and become certified as a journey mentor.
Yeah, I'm looking at this. You have training for mentors, training for individuals, benefits for organizations, benefits of mentor training. And the word success or successful is on your website, helping you become successful. In your opinion, or what's your definition of a success?
Oh my goodness, it's something that is described typically by the individual as to what they sort of feel. For me, what success is, it boils down to some of the smaller elements of things where if I can work with somebody, and as an example, somebody who is dealing with self-esteem, self-confidence, self-worth, all of the self's issues. If I can work with somebody who is struggling with those and change that around so that they become that positive person, and have the opportunity for them to be able to get a new job or start a job because they haven't, because their resume is all full of negativity. And now we've got it to a place where it's all positive energy. And as a result of that, I'm thinking of one in particular that had all kinds of, self-esteem, self-confidence, all kinds of issues with that. We spent some time, we did what I call a makeover, and got them to believe in themselves. And as soon as they launched their campaign to start to look for another job, because of what we had done, they actually ended up with 3 or 4 calls for interviews within a short period of time of them actually going live with a new resume.
Wow, man. So you probably see it just a total transformation in themselves, which obviously transforms their career, which transforms their bank account, which transforms their level of freedom. So it all connects eventually, right?
Yes, it does. Yeah.
And to be a part of that ride is probably pretty damn special, right? I see people transform when they start a book until when they finish, and then what happens after they finish. You probably see the same type of aspects of in individuals, just their communication skills, their confidence levels, right? Their clarity of who they're becoming, what they want to be known for. It's pretty special to see somebody develop like that.
And the one of the big things I know for me is the aspect of, everybody should have a mentor. Nobody should have to go on a journey, any journey for that matter, on their own. That there's always somebody there that can help you. They're not going to tell you what to do, but they're going to ask you questions that are going to help you engage your critical thinking skills, and become accountable for various outcomes that you feel are in line with what you want.
The book, guys, is called You Are Not Alone, Mental Health Mentors Take the Journey with You. Just came out a couple years ago, and I think it's very relevant. Whether you're fighting PTSD, or maybe you're dealing with some substance issue, or any type of identity crisis, or maybe just clearing up some of that confusion in your life, check out this book and get in touch with Doug Lawrence. Easy to find website, talentc.ca, on the web. So you can find his social media there, and there are many resources on the website. So, Doug Lawrence, thanks so much for being here, man. I really appreciate you sharing your message.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Appreciate that as well.
Remember, guys, $1 million book will lead to $1 million life. Right on.